Welcome to the Secure Start podcast, brought to you by the Secure Start Aura apps, supporting trauma-informed care and practice at home and in school.
When I was growing up in the care system, I had lots of people around me whose literal chosen thing to do with their life and their job and their career was to make sure that I was okay and that I was happy and thriving, dare I say. When I look back on what made the difference in my life and in my brother's, it's all about relationships. It's all about the people. It's all about having somebody that believes in you, that finds you funny or interesting or charming or whatever it is, and no matter what behaviors we are seeing day in, day out, shows up the next day with that fresh face. I think for the adults that support our children and young people, it's like just having that sense of hope and belief that we might not be there to see all of our lessons and everything that we're doing flourish and thrive, but we've just got to trust and know and hope that it will. And so I think this is the beauty of especially residential, where actually you can create environments where you have different young people with different interests, and you can show them and open them up to so many different experiences, different ways of life, different, like the adults that support them, they have different lives and different backgrounds, and opening up to knowing more beyond what you have experienced. My care experience is a part of me. It's not all of me. I'm so much more than that, but it's a part of my story, and it's not something I'll ever be ashamed of. Because I'm in care, I just thought I couldn't go traveling, and nobody had ever said to him, you can't go traveling. It was just the messages that had instilled in him over his care experience. And how sad is that? There is still a long way to go. When I ask people about what language they think of when they think of kids in care, what I'm always met with first is assumptions of naughty, unwanted, unlovable children that are not in employment, education or training, that are going to end up in the criminal justice system if that their parents didn't want them or couldn't handle them. And that's still such a large narrative, such a huge narrative that is out there, which is just inherently incorrect. But I was looking for those stories to almost be validated, that somebody else saw what I was going through, that they heard me, and none of that was heard. My story was told by somebody else and their perspective of what mattered. We can't cringe at ourselves at this, right? Because we have to be shame and blame free, because language is ever evolving, and actually just having the intention and the commitment to wanting to keep trying to get it right is what they will feel that.
Welcome to the Secure Start podcast. I'm Colby Pearce, and joining me for this episode is another leading voice in the care leaver and social care community. Before I introduce my guests, I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands that I come to you from, the Kaurna people of the Adelaide Plains, and acknowledge the continuing connection the living Kaurna people feel to land, waters, culture and community. I'd also like to pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. My guest this episode is Mary-anne Hodd. Mary-anne is the founder of Journeys That Care, a CPD accredited training, consultancy and speaking organisation that combines lived experience with professional insight. Care experienced herself, she draws on a background in psychology, teaching and therapeutic practice to support the adults who work with and around children and young people in care right across the UK. Her work is about bridging the gap between policy, practice and lived experience, supporting the adults around children and young people to build and sustain relationships in which both they and the children they care for feel safe, hopeful and able to thrive. Mary-anne is passionate about amplifying lived experience, challenging assumptions and supporting professionals to create environments where children and young people feel understood, valued, and able to thrive. I hope you enjoy our conversation. Welcome, Mary-anne, to the Secure Start podcast.
Thank you for having me, Colby. Very happy to be here.
Well, and I'm very happy to have you here too. We're connected on LinkedIn, and although we haven't interacted much, I have been following your, I guess, what you've been up to over the last probably 2 or 3 years. And in fact, you wouldn't know this because I haven't said it to you in any of our pre-recording conversations, but um, you were on my list right from the start.
Oh, look at that. I feel
Uh,
quite privileged for that. That's quite cool.
And yeah, and I feel a little bit bad in a way that it's taken so long to get to you. It's been a
Oh,
it's been a long list and lots of yeah. I've been privileged to have so many people on the
yeah,
podcast, and now I have you here. And um, one of the reasons why I really wanted to have you come on and talk about our shared area of endeavour being social care and the provision of social care for children is that you bring a very important perspective to this space. And but enough of me talking about it. Maybe if you can tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
yeah, sure. Um, I feel the pressure now, isn't it? It's get the words out in the right order. Here we go. Because yeah, you've had some brilliant guests on as well, by the way. It's great. Okay, so who am I? Yeah, Mary-anne, Mary is fine. And I guess that experience that you're talking about is a lived experience of growing up in the care system. So
Mm.
um, I um, I'll start with where I'm at now and then how I got there,
Sure.
really. So now I run my own business, which is crazy to say that actually, because for the last,
Mm.
I mean, the first couple of years, I was kind of just, doing it in my spare time as and when I could. And the last year or so, I've set up what is Journeys That Care, and I work with children's residential teams, fostering, local authorities, virtual schools, any of the adults that work with and
Mm.
around care experienced children and young people.
Mm.
And I'm really passionate about connecting that voice of lived experience with kind of the psychological theory and the practical application. So it's like, what might this that feelings focused stuff of like really connecting to what it might feel like to be that child or that young
Mm.
person living in our homes, being in these spaces where we are with them day in, day out, what that might be like to grow up in the care system. The theory behind why we might show up as that child or young person in some of the ways that we do, and then the practical application of like, well, now we know about it, what can we do about it?
Mm.
So I guess my work is centered around a few different themes. I'm really passionate about language. Um, and that's a good chunk of what I do is focused on language, and we'll talk more about that today, hopefully. And
Mm.
um, also about understanding the impact of early adversity, the potential impact, but not in a way that is, I guess, how I first understood it, which felt like I was doomed.
Yes.
um,
Mm.
but in a way, again, like, what makes the difference?
Mm.
Questions of identity and transitions and leaving care as well. So there's a good kind of few chunks of the things that I'm interested in, um,
Mm.
and that my work centers on. Um, and yeah, happy to answer any questions about any of that, and happy to also tell you, I guess, a bit more if it'd be useful about my journey of how I actually got to this point as well, if that's helpful.
Well, yeah, look, I'm always a little bit cautious around the history of people who have experienced significant adversity growing up or and who have been in out of home care. So I think a number of the care leavers that I've spoken to refer to it as trauma mining,
Yeah.
and I don't ever want to be. I've just I feel very uncomfortable with that.
Yeah.
Um,
I get that.
that my day job is I work as a clinical psychologist providing psychotherapy for children and young people in out-of-home care, and right through until they grow up to be young adults as
Yeah.
well. But it's
Yeah.
interesting that I'm speaking to you today, and it's probably my unconscious, was preparing me in between young people I was seeing today, because I started to get to think about the experience of children at school
Yes.
and how much parents know or don't know
Yeah.
about those experiences minute by minute that children have at school, their experiences of being away from the home, their experience of other young people, um, their experience of the teacher, their experience of the work there. And I don't know if I found myself thinking this would be a really good thing to write about that because giving such an insight. And I'll tell you the trigger for it was I walked out of my room into a waiting room I'm in a practice with doctors, medical doctors, and there was someone there who was almost a doppelganger of someone that I went to school with. And I thought, oh, I'm not overly proud of all those interactions that I had with that person. Um, yeah. Anyway, it's
Yeah,
interesting, and that's I think
it is.
the heart of lived experience voices, isn't it? Really, that
Yeah.
what it accesses for us.
Yeah, it is. And I think you're touching on something, right? I think when I think about my childhood and my experiences, what I don't do is just stand up and tell my story,
Mm,
X followed by X followed by X. I think that there's so much power in that.
mm,
But I think there's a lot of work that I've done to get to a point where I know what I'm sharing, why I'm sharing it, and what the impact is on the people that I'm sharing it with, and that action behind it. It's like that feeling
mm,
of, well, what can we do about this, right? I think adversity is part of life well, it's part of being human, isn't it? But what I know about the
mm,
children and young people that we support is that, and it's a narrative that I have carried with me in kind of helping me almost flip the script on what my care experience meant to me.
mm,
I think it's really common for care experience young people to experience othering, bullying, a sense of shame, a sense of that those compounding experiences of an early adversity, that complex trauma that so many of our young people are
mm,
carrying, and that label of what it means to be a kid in care carries
mm,
it carries so much with it, the stereotypes, the statistics that surround us. And so my one of the things that I'm really proud of my lived experience is being able to flip the lid on how I thought how it used to be for me. So I think when I
mm,
left care, I wanted nothing to do with it. I wanted to kind of get as far away as possible, happy not to really talk about it or think about it. And I very much had that classic teenage narrative of, I am the way that I am, and there's nothing you can do about it.
mm,
Um, and actually, as I've gotten older and started to understand, I did my psychology degree and my teaching degree, and in that the process of studying psychology, started to understand the impact of my early experiences and how they shaped me into being the way that I am. And maybe I'm not to blame for this. Maybe it's not my fault, and maybe I can do something about it. And with that kind of label of what it meant to be a kid in care, going from actually, well, care is supposed to be the safe place that picks you up when things go wrong at home, right? When home can't look after you in the way that it's supposed to, that's what care is supposed to do. And yet we know that so many of our young people are ending up far from where they could or should be. So a lot of what I do comes back to that kind of like what makes the difference. And I send my brother in this as well. So the power of lived experience is that ability to really know what it feels like to go through it.
Yeah.
Um, and when I look at mine and my brother's story, on paper, we had the same upbringing and very different outcomes. And I said I went off to university. I did some campaigning, which I can tell you more about the guarantor scheme actually today as well.
Mm.
My little brother, he went to live in a supported accommodation, a really rubbish one. I won't swear on your podcast, Colby. I'll keep it
Mm.
PC. A really rubbish one. And fell into the wrong crowd, as we say, and was like seeking connection in all the wrong places.
Mm.
And started using and dealing, and things snowballed for him, and he lost his job, lost his home, and became one of those statistics that surround us. So a lot of what I do now is being able to utilize that to kind of say,
Mm.
why was I maybe okay and he wasn't?
Mm.
And what makes the difference, right? Now that is such a massive question. There are
Yeah.
so many
Yeah.
pieces of the pie that go into that.
Mm.
But I feel really proud and grateful to be able to utilize that. And in that journey, with that narrative that we were talking about, co-experience as well, being able to say, actually, my co-experience now means to me, when I was growing up in the care system, I had lots of people around me whose literal chosen thing to do with their life and their job
Mm.
and their career was to make sure that I was okay and that I was happy and thriving, dare I say. That's what their job's supposed to be, right? And
Yeah.
knowing what I'm entitled to. And I got more support because I was in the care system. And I am where I am today because of that journey. And that journey is not without its challenges. It's the challenges don't change when you come, they don't stop when you come into care, they just
Mm.
change. But that's not something I'll ever be ashamed of. It's not something I will ever be embarrassed or hide from. It's actually, I think it's pretty cool that for a lot of our young people, they've been through in their early years more than some people will in their entire lifetime. And the fact that we are still
Mm.
here today is an achievement in
Mm.
itself. So how do we have that lens with looking at these children, young people in our homes and in wherever we're supporting them?
Yeah. It sounds a bit trite to say it, but I'm really pleased to hear you talk about your experience of adversity as being, rather than it being something that takes away from you and who you are as a person, it's actually something that it's given you something. It's kind of been your the trite bit would to say it's a bit like a superpower, but it's rather than diminish you, it's actually grown you. Yeah, yeah, you
Yeah.
because you have such knowledge.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be doing what I do today without it. Some days I joke with my husband, like, why can't I just be interested in something else? Because it's a lot at times, right? And
Yes.
I think that's again why I'm so passionate about supporting the adults that support these young people, because we have to, the classic saying, what is it? You can't pour from an empty cup. We've got to fill
No.
our own cups first, because it takes a lot to do this. But being able to, I think it's that, like, it's not one or the other, it's the and in the
Mm.
adversity for me. It's like
Mm.
I look at some of my biggest strengths now, which took me a really long time to be even able to say or talk about.
Mm.
Um, I am resilient, right? I'm really
Mm.
resilient, and I'm really proud of my resilience because it enables me to do what I do. I'm brave enough to sit on this podcast with you today, and if it all goes bit tits up, I'll be okay, right? Like, worse things have happened.
It won't.
But, um, but that resilience is something I'm so proud of now as an adult. But I should never have had to have been resilient
Mm.
when that strength was born. It was born out of an
Mm.
environment of neglect and abuse and complete dysfunction. I was
Mm.
resilient because I had to be, right? And like my perceptiveness, like, I think this is so interesting when you think about this. If we can think about how we support our young people to be able to reframe it in that sense, like my I'm quite good at reading a room,
Mm.
because I didn't even have to see my dad to know what kind of day we were going to have, what time he
Mm.
woke up, how heavy his footsteps were, how loud that door closed behind him. I knew Do I want to leg it and get the hell out of the house and come back when it's dark? Or are we going to have an okay day today? But that perceptiveness, that hypervigilance as a child is now a strength that I use day to day. And it never says that that makes the adversity okay. It's not saying that it's okay that stuff happened because now I've got good stuff. It's saying that stuff is not okay, and now I can use it for strength in my life now. And it's that is something I'm really interested in. I didn't get that from myself. I didn't get that language of my own strengths. I didn't pick that up, that was from the adults around me, and it wasn't many of them, and it wasn't even always people that were in my life for a long time, but it's in those relationships that somebody else pointed out what my strengths were, gave me the language for it, helped me understand what I was feeling, helped me start to give me the plant the seeds, of that possibility of positive change. So it's all of that I'm really interested in as well.
Yeah, well, you mentioned a little bit earlier about what is really important to have gotten you to this point that you've gotten to within your life. You've just now mentioned that there were certain key adults that were really important. I wonder if you might want to expand upon that a little bit, and maybe also talk to what else you think is really important or was really important to facilitate your growth to this point that you are in your life now.
Yeah. I think I'm just making a note of rights and entitlements. I'll come back to that. Excuse me. I think there's a lot that comes into it, but actually it's pretty simple. And I think that's what I keep coming back to in all of what we do and how we do it. I think we can get caught up in regulations and to-do lists and keeping our young people physically safe from harm, and but actually when I look back on what made the difference in my life and in my brother's, it's all about relationships. It's all about the people. It's all about having somebody that believes in you, that finds you funny or interesting or charming or whatever it is, and no matter what behaviors we are seeing day in day out, shows up the next day with that fresh face. And I often think about who is that significant adult for our young people, and I think that can feel like a bit of pressure sometimes if that is you or you're that one person for somebody. But I think in my life it was never just one person. It was lots of people in little snippets over the years. So at times it was my foster mum that made me study really hard and gave me the resources and the routine and the structure and everything. And other times it was a social worker that took me to the movies. I was watching Final Destination came up on the TV the other day, actually, and I just got this flashback to my social worker taking me to watch the first Final Destination in the cinema. Wow. And I remember, her saying to me for months afterwards, how she was still just absolutely shaken by it. She does not like scary movies, but she did it for me, and I loved it. And I remember her the fear in her face, and it's in those little moments that that's what sticks with you. The teacher that when I was in primary school and just before we were taken into full-time care, I hadn't been sleeping. My dad's schizophrenia was really bad. I was up in the night with my dad a lot. And my teacher could just see this, and she just put out a beanbag and she let me sleep, and she got me some clean clothes, and she fed me, and she phoned social services as well, as she should have done. But those little things in the moment, the lesson wasn't as important as me being safe and held. My RE teacher that became head of sixth form when I was in secondary school, that when I was going through my exams and really struggling to stay in school, that said I could go to his office and have a cup of tea when I felt if I felt like I was going to leave school, just go to his office instead and we'll make a cup of tea. Kept me in school, kept me in my exams. the
Mm.
psychology teacher that gave me the language to help me understand my interest in psychology. It's all of those like
Mm.
little moments that have like built up to what I now look back on as like the things that made the difference, when
Mm.
in all of those moments there is so much stuff that's going on at home, that the adversities are still there, the challenges are still there, but you've got these like people that just create moments for you to
Mm.
see you as a child, no matter how horrible I'd been to them the day before, met me at the, the school gates, let's go Mary, fresh day, like fresh start. It's, I think the little things really become the big things in that. um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Louise Allen, who was on the podcast a little while back, she said, all I really wanted was an adult who would smile when they saw me,"
Yeah, wow.
which I thought,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
know I'm very, very mindful of smiling whenever I greet any of our young people now. Um, James Angler, the most recent past podcast that has been published was the podcast episode I did with James Anglin, and he talked about Rubik's cubes, and it's a
yeah,
very, and I may not be exactly remembering it how he described it, but this is what it again, it came up today in my practice, but this was what I took from that conversation is that, the number of different permutations of a Rubik's Cube is some quintillion number. It is such a huge number, but the number of reliable steps to complete it is actually quite a small number. So people who can complete a Rubik's Cube really quickly,
yeah,
um, and the world record at the moment, I think, is 3 seconds, and they can do it from any of those quintillion
yeah,
ways of setting it up because they know how to get from there to there, so to speak, with
yeah, yeah,
whatever they're. And but the story, what I take from that is that it it doesn't have to be as complex
mm.
as the quintillion moves.
No,
There it and in fact my preference is always for those simple gestures, those simple relational connections,
yeah,
relational behaviors that support connections that
yeah,
heal. And it's an incremental
yeah,
process. As I hear you talk about it, it's not one big thing. It's not the therapy you went to. It's not
no,
that you went to the perfect foster placement, or it's just a
no.
collection of moments
Yeah,
that
yeah,
add
yeah.
up. Mm.
And time on that as well, right? I think like when I was in, I think a lot of this perspective that I'm able to give now is because I'm 32 and I've been out of the care system for 15 years plus, gosh. And when I was in it, I would have had a different story, right? And I was just
Mm.
focused on living, on getting by, on the next thing, on trying to be a kid whilst also functioning within a system that doesn't always make it the easiest to do that, and the
Mm.
challenges that's going on around it, of just getting by. And it wasn't until I actually had long left care and I was 23 when I met my husband, and we got our own place together, and I felt like a sense of calm
Mm.
that I'd never experienced before. And it's when that the lessons like started to like come back. I think for the adults that support our children and young people, it's like just having that sense of like of hope and belief that we
Mm.
might not be there to see all of our lessons and everything that we're doing flourish and thrive, but we've just got to trust and know and hope that it will. And I
Mm.
think about that all of the time and what our priorities are, because I think when you're a kid in the care system, life can feel so serious, and
Mm.
it can be it's like, yeah, you've grown up in this environment of for lots of our young people, like dysfunction and adversity, and we learn to survive in those environments. We do whatever we have to do to make that survival work, and then all of that is taken away, and we're moved then to a new environment that is maybe physically safe, but emotionally, physiologically, my nervous system is screaming danger, danger, danger. I tell you what, at the end of today, if we've got time, I'll read you a poem that encapsulates that feeling actually.
We'll make time.
Um, it's a really powerful one. It's not it's written by a supervising social worker. I'll share it.
Mm,
That feeling of like, I remember like the fridge being full, which I'd never experienced before. It's just a lot, isn't it? There's a lot of a
mm,
lack of autonomy, a lot lack of control. It can feel heavy at times. And I
yeah.
think when you match that with the statistics that surround our care experience, young adults growing up in that, you can kind of feel like your future is like determined before you have a chance to figure that out for yourself. And I think that's why it's
Mm,
so important for the adults to like understand what the impact of that might be, and then for us to have high aspirations, to dare to dream for them, to show them a different way, to challenge the narratives, to challenge the labels, and for all of that to be drip fed through everything that we do, to create spaces for joy, for play, to
mm,
just be a kid, all of it.
mm. There's so much going through my mind listening to you speak, and but one of the things that really is very much in the forefront of my mind is that um, it's interesting how a lot of the focus of endeavour in this space continues to be trying to get adults to look behind the behaviour and understand the child behind it. I think that's really telling, and
Yeah,
um,
yeah,
and also this ties back in with earlier comments about the value of voices that can say what it's like to be a child in this space. And
yeah,
it's such a vexed space to work. It's high stress. All the adults are elevated a lot of the time, and they all want to they all want to do what's best by the children. And
yeah,
often enough, they've all got their own version of what the best thing is to do by the children, and it's their version. And so you get this scenario where you get all these adults in a room to talk about the child, and the first person whose voice is lost is
yeah,
the child's voice as the
yeah,
adults. Yeah. So,
yeah, yeah. I think about that all the time, like whose agenda are we on?
mm,
Um, because when you ask people their why of why we get into this, it's to support kids to have a better life, right? Like it's not about the to-do lists or the bureaucracy, which we can all get so stuck in. And I see it no matter whether it is with fostering children's residential, whether it's with schools, we can all get stuck in what the wider system challenges are, which is why we have to always come back and focus on what we can do, what where those the classic circles of control activity, where's our influence and what can we focus on that makes a difference. Because like all of those people, the stories that I shared, it's not in the paperwork that is what's remembered. It's in the moments. It's the
mm,
relational togetherness. And so I think all the time about that meeting with my social worker, and if I see her at the door, but before I actually see her, I see the clipboard and the first thing you're doing is coming into my foster mum's room, where, as far as I'm concerned, she's sat outside that door listening to every word that I'm saying. So I'm not really going to tell
mm,
you what I think here. And then we've got a questionnaire that's circled this sad smiley or middle face that tells me how you feel, which means, you know, F all to a child too much for me. Like, and I think that's what's hard. It's one of the reasons that my social worker left that was so good, because she was running out of resources and time to be able to, where she did used to pick me up and take me to the cinema. And that's where I would tell her in that
mm.
car journey what really mattered. Um, it's in the how of it all that really makes a difference, doesn't it? It's
Yeah.
yeah. I think also the other thing I missed when you were asking me about what made the people that made the difference. And I think this is something that's really important when we think about our young people in care, is it's some of the things that I think about practically in my life now is also knowing what I was entitled to as a care experienced young
Mm.
person, because I was entitled to extra support, extra resources. I leaned into my local authority being my corporate parent. I founded the first official guarantor scheme in the UK for care experienced young people, where I
Mm.
leaned into them acting as a good parent would. And I said, you have to be my corporate parent. And we designed a scheme and they did act as my corporate parents. I got to rent in the private rental sector. They've given, when I wanted to do a course and I've needed money for it, if I wanted to go to uni, they've helped me understand what I was entitled to and what my roots were. And I think that's really important when we are the adults supporting young people, is to, know, for example, what the Leaving Care Act says that your young people are entitled to. Just know it, talk to
Mm.
them about it, because it will help with that aspiration of where they might want to go and what they might want to do, because there are so many practical barriers, and like the finances side is such a big one. So knowing, one of the reasons I went to uni at the time was because I got the grant. I got the maintenance grant. It doesn't exist anymore, but my social worker said, if you go to uni, you're going to get a maintenance grant, which means each month you'll get X, Y, and Z, and you won't have to pay for your accommodation. And so in my mind, I went, oh, cha-ching, you're paying me to go to uni. I'm going to make that work. Like knowing my rights and entitlements is a really important part of that. And again, comes from
Mm.
the adults supporting me. Sorry, that was a little side quest on what we were talking then.
No, no, I mean, it's all part of the richness of the conversation. And I was reacting particularly to the idea of how we support children in care to realize their dreams and aspirations. And
Yeah,
but in the back of my mind, Mary-anne, and is was thinking about all the children that I've known over this past 30 plus years, and I'm wondering about those conversations I have with them where they say they're not sure what the future
yeah.
looks like for them. What they don't they they haven't. I mean, I have plenty of children, young people who want to be psychologists based on the interactions they have with me. They think I've got the best job in the world, but but a lot of the times our children, I would say, either struggle to or won't dare to dream.
Yeah, but is that any wonder? Where if you think about their background and then the language or the perceptions of being that kid in care as well, and the messages that are kind of
Yep.
streamed in, and just being a teenager, when all of this question comes up, is like, what an insane time as it is anyway. Like everything's changing, your brain is remodeling, your hormones are raging, like you figuring out your social norms and expectations, who you are as an individual, but also where you sit in your peers. You're testing boundaries. Are the boundaries really there, or are they
Mm,
there just because that adult said that they're there? All of that stuff is like normal and expected, and then on top of that you add that impact of early adversity, and it's so much pressure. Like
mm,
I remember it so clearly. I remember that you get suddenly into your exams and people are asking you, what are you going to do next, where are you going to go? And I think for people that grow up in a traditional family environment, and it might be easier to have had stories as you're growing up about what your dad does, what your mum does, what your auntie does. And I think in the care system, some of that stuff gets lost along the way. And I
mm,
remember my brother saying he felt such enormous pressure. And he said to me, I will never forget it. He said, I don't know what I want to do, Mary, so I'm going to do nothing. And by God, did he stand by that for a little while, right? Like,
mm,
because he just felt like what he was deciding to do was going to be what he was going to do for the rest of his life. And I think being able to story tell and create opportunities for our young people to experience lots of different things whilst they're with us, I think this is the
mm,
beauty of especially residential, where actually you can create environments where you have different young people with different interests, and you can show them and open them up to so many different experiences, different ways of life, different like the adults that support them, they have different lives and like, different backgrounds, and opening up to knowing more beyond what you have experienced
Mm.
is really important. I like, it's so important. I think I always think about this lad. I was doing a workshop with a group of 10 to 15-year-olds that had experienced bullying because they were in care, or they wanted to hide their care experience. They didn't want other people to know about it. They were ashamed. And we had 2 hours together to kind of talk about that narrative that I said at the beginning of today, which is, I'm my care experience is a part of me. It's not all of me. I'm so much more than that, but it's a part of my story, and it's not something I'll ever be ashamed of. And I was talking to them about having gone traveling, which is something I'm so proud of. Me and my husband spent 2 years traveling Canada, and my parents have never even had a passport, right? It's something that would never have been possible for me. And we worked so hard to get there, it's so hard to stay out there. And this 15-year-old lad who was so articulate, his eyes lit up. And I said, "Is that something you'd like to do?" And he said, "I would love to go traveling." And I said, "Well, that's amazing. Like, where would you want to go?" And
Mm.
he just went, but I just thought I never could." And I said, "What do you
Mm.
mean?" And he said, "Well, because I'm in care, I just thought I couldn't go traveling." And nobody had ever said to him, "You can't go traveling." It was just the messages that had, like, instilled in him over his care
Yeah.
experience. And how sad
Yeah.
is that, right? Like, why it should be the other way. Like,
I
yeah,
Robbie Gilligan, just shout out to Robbie. He talked very much about important adults in in the lives of children,
yeah,
and doing. He talked about Sinead O'Connor and the nun who used to take her out to the nightclubs, and which I think ties in beautifully with what you're saying. I want to. There's a reflection that I have on what you're saying, which I'm interested in your response to. And just as a separate thing comment, I do love to try and explore with children what they're interested in, what their likes and dislikes are, but particularly what their deeply held dreams and aspirations and interests are, and talk to them about it and
yeah,
acknowledge it and validate it. Because, and this is the reflection, I wonder whether in this space too involved in, or too focused on what we see as a primary task, or an endeavor to support recovery. So we're trauma focused, we're trauma informed, we're trauma focused, we're trauma centered. But I wonder whether sometimes there's too much focus on the trauma, on trauma
yeah,
and trauma recovery, and we miss these things that you're talking about, these conversations about life and all the
yeah,
richness that exists in
yeah,
life outside of trauma. The ability to, I mean, one of my particular interests is living off grid and building my own buildings, and doing all that sort of thing. And a number of the young lads that come to see me, they're interested in that too. And we have a great old
yeah,
conversation about it.
yeah, yeah,
Um, but computers the same. I'm interested in pulling them apart, pulling and putting them back together again.
yeah,
We've run
yeah.
almost like workshops on that in therapy. Although the serious adults would say, remember, you're not here to talk about or fix computers.
No, but why not, right? Because
Why
like
not? Yeah,
for so much of that child's life, it has been so serious and so focused on what is next. And yeah, let's set the smart goals for him, and are they achievable? And every PEP meeting and lack review and all of everything that we're surrounded in is like, well, what's the next goal? And how are you achieving this? Or how are you getting there? And it's like, well, actually, like what I might do in my life might be surrounded in the fixing computers. And when I'm having that moment where you're in relation, that intersubjectivity of just being in it
with
together,
it. Mm,
that's when the good stuff happens. And like,
mm,
I think that's that strengths lens as well, isn't it? I think about a psychologist that was working with a friend of mine, was pulled in because there was this young girl, 16, 17. Her foster family were really worried about her because she was just spending all of her time on the computer and she wasn't socializing. They were just really worried.
Mm.
And eventually they figured out that on the computer, she's like building something, building houses, like I
Mm.
don't know what it was, but she had some sort of like game programming thing. So they eventually used that. They got her enrolled in this graphic design course, and she went on to do really well and like have a, because they flipped that lens on like what are they spending their time in, where is that interest, and how can we flip that.
Mm.
And if they don't have any interest or they don't know, then it's about us maybe giving a bit of ourselves and saying, well,
Mm.
actually, cause isn't it really fun when we do this? Or do you want to come and kick that ball around with me? Or shall we go out and see this thing? And creating opportunities for those moments for us to experience what might become an interest, or that thing that makes us laugh, or that thing that makes us light up, and those memories. Like
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
in all of that, isn't it?
I have a particular lad that I reflect on who I do sometimes wonder, he gets in so much trouble. He's such a mischievous lad, and he thinks it's all the biggest laugh. And the adults in his life would probably be horrified to know that I really find some of his antics to be quite funny, in fact. Just as and I do sometimes wonder whether I'm the only adult in his life that enjoys the scallywag in him,
Yeah,
that really enjoys that.
yeah, yeah,
Um, and he does seem to get so much out of that interaction that is
yeah,
um, appreciating rather than seeing it
yeah,
as an inadequacy, just appreciating,
yeah.
that what a
And it doesn't mean
performer
you have
he
to
is.
approve it and say, yeah, this is great, this is what you're gonna, it's
Yeah,
not
you
saying
should
like,
do it. Yeah,
but yeah, but it's saying like, yeah, I can appreciate that. And
yeah.
it's not okay that you also do this at the same time. It's like the connection correction stuff, isn't it? It's the two hands of
Yes.
like the DDP approach, where, thinking about, for so many of our young people, it's straight into fix this, change this, try this. But
Mm,
actually, I think that's the challenges sometimes, is that it might take weeks, months just to build that relationship with that young person who has been let down so many times, who is described as hard to engage in his files. Well, is it a wonder, right? Like
mm,
this is what he's been through. It might take a really long time. And I think that's really hard when you've then got, well, what's the outcome of this session, and what are we
mm.
meeting this target? And actually sometimes we just need to step back and create moments for the
Yeah,
relationship
yeah.
again. Yeah,
I do. I think a couple of things. I think those of us who work in this space as therapists need to get better at explaining what we do that is therapeutic, and yeah, and I think that the people who engage us need to get better at understanding what is therapeutic as well.
yeah,
But language, it's not just what we do, it's how we say. Language is really important to you. You've mentioned it
yeah,
more than once already. Tell us a little bit of your thoughts around the language we use in this space.
yeah. I think it's quite heavy for a lot of it. And I think this
Mm.
is what is so challenging. I wish that it could be a picture of positivity. I will say, I do hope we are at a point of critical change, and we might start to see some of that change in the years to come. But I think it does take a long time for change to be embedded. We've talked about language for years now, and the perceptions of what it means to be a kid in care, and the
Mm.
stereotypes. Um, and, you know, I mean, I don't know if you saw the news, but here in the UK, I think it was around Christmas time, there was like, for example, an MP, a councillor in Cambridgeshire, sat at a meeting talking about kids in care. You're nodding, yeah?
I think I know
Um,
the story that you go, though
yeah.
I'm way, 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 way on the other side of the world. I'm
You're
pretty
on that
sure I
speak
know the
to.
story.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because he
yeah,
said, they're not just these aren't just naughty kids, these are downright evil children, talking
yeah.
about children and young people in care. And I think maybe a few years ago he might have kind of gotten away with that, maybe, and it might have almost been brushed past. But every
Mm,
single other person at that table challenged him and said, "You can't say that. These are children, young people that have lived through extreme adversity, that are managing, with the impact of complex trauma." And then he was removed from his post, damn straight, right? So that we had accountability. So I hold on to that as a point of
mm,
like, I hope we're at a point of change, but there is still a long way to go. When I ask people about what language they think of when they think of kids in care, what I'm always met with first is assumptions of naughty, unwanted, unlovable children that are not in employment, education, or training, that are going to end up in the criminal justice system if, that their parents didn't want them or couldn't handle them. And that's still such a large narrative, like such a huge narrative that is out there, which
mm,
is just inherently incorrect. I'm not in the care system because I'm a naughty, unwanted, unlovable child. I'm in because of what I've been through and what my parents have been through, and that intergenerational element to this, right? um so I'm really passionate about language in the sense that I think it changes our perception, and
mm,
then if we change our perception, we can change how we respond, and then in turn maybe that will start to change, how young people see and understand themselves. Because again, my brother's
mm,
voice is ringing in my head where he said, they expect me to fail, Mary, so that's what I'm going to do. It's like that lack of aspiration that had instilled in him from all of these people around him, that he then took on as that self-fulfilling prophecy.
mm,
So I think there's a lot of kind of catch-all terminology that also surrounds us if we think about young people's files. So
mm,
like, challenging behavior is a really common one. So I really think it's important that we really think about, what does that mean?
mm,
Any of these hard to engage, what does it really
mm,
mean? Who is the behavior challenging? Is it challenging the young person? Is it challenging me as the adult because I don't know how the hell to deal with it? What's actually happening? What am I actually seeing? Describe the behavior rather than labeling it, giving maybe context to that as well. Like, what was happening before? What's the after? What's the so what of it? And I think that's the tricky stuff with how we record, because for a long time we've been told to, the priorities in our recording. It's funny when I ask people why do you record? What's your priority in
mm,
recording? And there's often a few different responses, and it's set in, well, to protect ourselves and to protect the young people, so we can evidence our decision making for Ofsted. And on the other side of that is like, well, we're storytelling. We're actually authoring a young person's story,
life.
a young
Mm,
person's childhood. And like, what an absolute privilege it is to be able
mm,
to do that. And you can do that and write completely child-centered and have curiosity and compassion and intention in your recordings, whilst evidencing and meeting all of the regulations and everything else that comes on
mm,
that side of stuff, and being professional with this professional hat on that people come back to. It's not one or the other. But when you think about the legacy of what we leave behind, that's my priority in recording, right? Because when
mm,
you read some young people's files, that, yeah, describe hard, manipulative, attention seeking, or hard to engage and challenging behavior, and it paints this picture of this, like, you know
evil child.
little demon child. Yeah. And actually
Mm,
there's so much going on with that, and I think people sometimes struggle because they go, well, we're told not to use our opinion when we're recording, and yeah, right, you shouldn't be conclusive in saying you did this, but you threw the chair at me because you were really angry because at your mum because of X. But you can be curious and you can
mm,
use your professional insight and your relationship with that child to not just say, you show challenging behavior today and through the chair or X, Y, and Z, but actually maybe it's because of what happened this morning on the phone call with your mum. Or
Yeah.
maybe it's not about the fact we asked you to put your plate in the sink, but the fact that your dad hasn't shown up for the third week in a row. It's the
Mm.
like the ifs, the buts and the maybes. And then that repair at the end of like that restorative, like, well, what are we going to do about it, right? Like what happens next?
Mm.
It doesn't just paint them as this like bad child. I think about,
Mm.
I'm trying to get it all out because there's so much that comes into it. But I think ultimately, I think about my files, um, and my journey of getting my own files, which is quite an unhuman process in itself, right? It's kind of like you fill in that subject to access request, and you say you want everything, and then you wait, and they're meant to get it back to you within 30 days, which we just know does not happen. I was actually with a local authority the other day whose average wait time is 3 years at the moment to get their files, which is just a disgrace, really. Like, why that 30-day timeline exists, I don't know. So you're kind of expecting them in that 30-day window. Close to the end of that, you get another letter or an email to say, we don't have it yet. We'll let you know when we do. And mine came just over a year later in a secure email in my inbox with no words, no like, maybe don't read this alone. Maybe, this is what you're about to open. Maybe do it with some support. Take your time with it. I opened it up on my lunch break, which was a really bad idea. And when I eventually got round to reading it 6 months later, because it sat in my inbox with like
Mm.
a wobbly chest, it was about 8 hours worth of reading, and I was left with more questions than answers and what I learned in that is the story that I was looking for, the things that I really remember from my childhood. I've got big gaps that are missing, and a lot of the stuff that I do remember is surrounded in the
Mm.
trauma. But I was looking for those stories to almost be validated, that somebody else saw what I was going through, that they heard me, and none of that was heard. My story was told by somebody else and their perspective of what mattered. And actually, in 8 hours of reading, there was one line that I was left with, and it just read, Mary-anne wants to be a vet when she's older. How simple is that line? Right?
Mm.
How simple is that? Because in 8 hours of reading about all of the challenges that were going on at home and at school and everywhere,
Mm.
that one line reminded me of who I was beyond all of that. This little girl
Mm.
at 7 years old that was obsessed with animals, that didn't have friends but would sit in the playground playing with woodlice. When I was like knit girl in school at that time, would talk to
Mm.
all the cats on my walk home from school to meet my dad at the pub. It brought that little girl to life, of beyond all of the badness in that
Mm.
one sentence. And I think that's what we get to do as the adults supporting our kids, is like create this
Mm.
tapestry of who they are beyond all of that. And it doesn't mean we
Mm.
deny the challenges, it doesn't mean we hide away from them, because that's my story too, and they deserve to be
Mm.
honored. But it deserves to be honored in a way that people understand and try and show compassion and also see me beyond that, right? Like,
Mm.
I wish I
Mm.
had more of those lines. I wish I had
Yeah.
more.
Yeah. Yeah. The trouble is who are they written for? That's what
Yeah.
gets in the way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was cringing a little bit in there, although I probably masked it quite well. But when you were talking about problem behaviors, complex behaviors, and that sort, I was thinking, yeah,
Yeah.
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 I've tried to soften it over the years. At the moment, I probably use behaviors of concern. Um, but while you've been speaking, I've been thinking what I should call them is behaviors that are not understood yet.
Yeah. Yeah,
I'm going to
right.
write that down. No,
Actually,
no, no.
I like that. Right. Really simple, like because also, yeah, behaviors of concern. Who is it concerning? What does it actually mean? And I think that's
Mm.
like, if I was that child looking back, no, because we have to be we can't cringe at ourselves at this, right? Because we have to be shame and blame free, because language is ever evolving, and actually just
Mm,
having the intention and the commitment to wanting to keep trying to get it right is what our young, they will feel that, they will feel
mm,
that, right? And it's not about us. It's not like a tick box, just as healing isn't, which I used to think it was. I used to think I could fix myself. And I could, exercise, eat well, do all of this stuff, and I would be fixed. There's no end point to it, just as there isn't
no.
with language. We're on the journey, and so that's like, we can't cringe at it. But I really like that. Say it again. Behaviors.
Behaviors that are not understood yet.
Yeah, yeah, right. And
Coming
and
to a
and then you
LinkedIn
can
post
be,
near
hey.
you. Uh,
And then you can describe some of those behaviors, right? Like you can,
mm,
like, we can be descriptive of what we are seeing, um which then might give more curiosity as to where it comes from. And like, I think
mm,
I had this conversation with the children's residential team the other day of like thinking about, well, she always does this behavior, and we were kind of saying, well, when then if we describe it and we can start to paint the picture around it, we can start to understand, well, this actually, it always happens on a Wednesday when she knows that she's seeing mum the next day, for example, so you can start to
mm.
paint a better picture around what else might be going on, which in turn will then help you understand what to do next,
Yeah,
what they
yeah.
might need. Yeah.
Mary-anne, I could talk to you for much longer than the time we have available to us. Unfortunately, I don't. I'd love to talk to you perhaps another time about the leaving care experience.
Yeah,
Um,
please.
but I do also want to just come back to, before we finish up, I wanted to come back to something that you said earlier on, which was about it being hard to work in this space as well, being a person who has lived it. And
Yeah.
I wonder what you do to look after yourself in this space.
Yeah, I do. I do a lot actually, but also not a lot at the same time. I live what is a really simple life. Actually, that teenage me would look at me now and go, "Oh my gosh, how boring."
Mm,
But I keep it quite simple, and I'm really mindful about what I'm carrying, and I do try and create space away from it. But at the same time, I do feel really blessed that I have such a like a passion for what I do. I think that
mm,
I feel really lucky to be able to feel so driven to do this. But yeah, it's quite simple. I've got my little boy who is 2 years old, so he
mm,
takes up all of my spare time, and he's amazing. And I mean, that's been a learning journey in itself, and actually something we could also talk about. I'm going to be talking about it with my friend Becca Pierre at some point, because we both became mums around the same time,
mm,
and that journey in itself, being care experienced, is really layered,
mm,
especially because I know we both look at our little boys and we love them so much, like
mm,
cannot imagine letting the stuff happen to him that happened to us. So that's a layer, that's another layer in it, right?
mm,
But creating space for us to play and have fun, and we get in the water a lot. We've been at the beach this weekend. We walk a lot, we eat, we cook, we eat good food. It's the simple stuff. I think it's coming back to the basics. I try and move my
mm,
body. I'm not always good at it though, and I think it's having that compassion with yourself. I think some days are great, and some months are great, and then one day you can have a day and everything will go out the window. And I used to really beat myself up about that, but it's
mm,
actually just knowing that that's also okay, because that little version of me that lived with the abuse is still in there, still trying to protect me, and I can
mm,
have compassion with that. So there's a lot. There's also a lot of work around boundaries. It's some of the work I do now around. You said earlier on about hearing how important it is that we hear from people that have grown up in the
mm,
system, and to not trauma mine.
mm,
And how I've been invited to multiple spaces to come up and share your story and be the
mm,
only person in the room that's not paid to be there, and we'll ask all of these questions about the in and outs of your life. And actually, I was so grateful for the opportunity to begin with that I just wanted to
Mm.
say yes to everything. So actually, we need to really support our care experienced young people to know what's safe to share and what's not, and how to look after themselves, and how to, yeah, have that kind of equal play in the room, because that's a lot in itself, isn't it?
Mm.
So that, I mean,
Mm.
that goes into a whole nother conversation.
Yeah, yeah. Again, whenever I have the more podcast conversations I have, I guess the bigger my back library that I have to reflect on as I'm speaking to the guest before me. One of my earlier guests um, is Adela Holmes. She's here in Australia. She works in this space here in Australia. She's had an extraordinarily long career in this space. And has said, and I've used this quote in little snippets, but she says the great aspiration of children who grow up in care is an ordinary life,
Mm,
which is the first
love that.
when you said teenage me would find my current life to be boring. But it's interesting, isn't it? Whoop, the great aspiration of children who grow up in care is an ordinary
Yeah,
life.
yeah, yeah. And I think that's the other thing when we talk about those strengths and the gratitude. I practice gratitude a lot, and actually,
Mm,
I think about in when I think about some of my other friends, is actually like I really I'm just so grateful every single day to
mm,
have this life that I do, and I think that's
mm.
such a blessing. It's such a perspective to be able to really just really appreciate it, like all of those little moments. It gives you really good perspective on what matters, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it does.
Well,
um
I've really enjoyed our conversation,
Colby, I
Mary-anne.
want to read this poem to
Yes, you
you.
got to do the poem.
I've got
Yes.
to do it because when we were talking earlier about that experience of, I think sometimes we can get caught up in, get them in, and they've got the clean bed and the food, and then we'll move on. And just reminding ourselves of what that might feel like is quite a
Mm,
powerful thing to do. So this poem was actually written by a supervising social worker called Tim
mm,
McCardle. I've
mhm,
messaged him before to get permission to read his poems.
mm,
And it's called The First Day of Placement. Again, that language of placement, we could talk about that.
mm,
And it's actually written about a young person going into their first foster home, but the feelings transcend, right? So
mhm,
um, I the first time I read this, I felt like he kind of articulated some of what I couldn't articulate for myself
mm, mm,
at the time. Okay, the first day of placement. As I walked in the house, all the faces were new. They smiled at me, and the dog came into view. They sat themselves down in what they called the lounge, with pictures of children and family around. They speak of my mum, of my dad and my nan. They speak like they think like they know who I am. It's private, my life. But they talk on, and she tells them of all the things that I've done wrong. I didn't ask to be here, but they tell me the rules. They tell me they're firm and won't be taken for fools. And so I look at my lap and turn off from their voices. And they mention some more about me having choices. The dog still looks happy. And so I stroke his head. The life of a dog would be better, I said. They looked at me and they squinted their eyes. The fact that I spoke must have been a surprise. I won't say any more. I don't know what they're thinking. And I hide the tears in my eyes by repeatedly blinking. I'm sorry for mum. And I hope she's all right. I hope that my parents won't start to fight. The worker stands up and says she must head. But before she leaves, we must go see my bed. So we go on upstairs and walk into my space, made up for a boy, but that's not the case. It isn't my room, and I'm feeling so numb. This house looks quite nice, but it's not got my mum. The worker then goes, and I'm there by myself, and I stay in my room and put things on my shelf. I think of my school and my friends and my nan. I think, who would care if I turned around and ran? I think that I got it wrong and I made a mistake. I should have stayed quiet for mum and dad's sake. And now they are sad. And so I breathe with a sigh, and I can't hold it back, and I'm starting to cry. But Liz hears the sound. She comes up to see me. She doesn't say much, but she holds on to me. She ushers me down and offers me food. I'm not really hungry, but I don't want to be rude. The fridge is so full, and there is so much to choose, and clean plates and bowls and glasses to use. I end up with some toast, which I slowly pick, and my chest is still feeling tight, and I'm still feeling sick. But Dave makes me hot chocolate, faces it down with a grin. He tells me that I'm safe and that I'll want for nothing. I don't really believe him because I've never felt safe. But for the moment, at least, I might like this place. Loads in that, isn't it? Yeah.
It's powerful. What was the author's name again?
Tim McArdle.
Tim McArdle.
Yeah. And I think that when we talk about that connection to the child's voice, like him writing that as a supervising social worker, it's a bit of an insight, isn't it? Into you can get it. You can like we do.
Absolutely.
Being able to articulate it, it's really powerful.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that really sticks to me though is like towards the end is that like it's those small gestures again that just start to like, maybe this will be all right. Those
few moves that solve the quintillion possibilities of the Rubik's Cube.
Just have a hot chocolate, slice of toast, you'll be safe.
Those little gestures, cumulative harm needs cumulative healing. It sounds a bit naff. It is something that I have put up on my socials, but
I'm right with you.
Yeah. Sometimes I think I'm just a little bit too simple and straightforward in this field, but then this was a wonderful validating conversation to have. Thank you. I feel better. All right. Well, thank you, Mary-anne, and it has been a very good conversation, very enjoyable, and I hope to speak to you again another time.
Yeah, I would love that. We'll keep in touch for sure, and thanks again for having me.